Okay, good day everyone. Today we will going to continue with our lesson, and this time we will going to tackle about chapter 4, and let's start with lesson 1. So we have already discussed from chapter 1, which is the introduction of determining your random variables. For your lesson 2, we have discussed about the normal distribution, and for the lesson 3, we also discuss about the sampling distribution. But take note that these chapters and the lessons inside these chapters are interconnected. So on your lessons 4, after uh, knowing about your random variables or your probability distribution, your normal distribution, and your sampling distribution, now it's time to make inferences, or we will going to make our own hypothesis, which also includes your inferences. Okay, so the first question that we will going to discuss, or we will going to encounter, is what we call your hypothesis testing. Okay, so chapter 4 talks about hypothesis testing. The first question that will going to come in your mind is the word hypothesis. Okay, so on our previous education, we have already have encountered the word hypothesis, especially in our science subjects. So when we say hypothesis, this is actually what we call uneducated guess. That is the most common definition that we have encountered in our previous science classes. Now, in your statistics and probability, there are two hypotheses that we that is being determined. That is, the first one is the what we call your null hypothesis, and the second one is what you call your alternative hypothesis. Okay, so when we say null, from its word null, meaning there is no changes that's going to happen. And when we say alternative, but if there is a changes, or it does not confirm with the first statement, we call that as alternative hypothesis. Okay, so we will going to continue with our lesson 1 of your chapter 4 of hypothesis testing, or testing of hypothesis. Okay, so let's open our discussion for lesson 4. Okay, so null and alternative hypothesis. So in research, making a decision or conclusion is very important so that we can address our concern regarding the population's characteristics. There's a lot of factors, or what we call the variables, we need to consider before we can make a conclusion. To justify our conclusion regarding the population and to address our concern, so a statistical procedure is needed called hypothesis testing. Okay, so when we say hypothesis testing, of course, there is always the what we call null hypothesis. And the hypothesis testing main purpose, is that we need to know if the null hypothesis is true or not. If it is true, yeah, then null hypothesis will remain, and if it is false, then we need to use or to make another hypothesis, or what we call the alternative hypothesis. So here, hypothesis is an educated guess on your science. Now here, when we say hypothesis testing, it is actually a decision-making process for evaluating claims about a population based on the characteristics of a sample purportedly coming from the population. So when we do hypothesis testing, that is about or a decision-making based on the evaluation claims. Okay, so that means it already gone through a process, a data processing, and now this is the time where we will going to test whether we make an evaluation correctly. Okay, so the decision is whether the characteristics is acceptable or not. Okay, so the word again, hypothesis, is what we call an educated guess to be tested in the study about population, or statement to be tested, predicted by the researcher to be outcome of the study. So population or statement. So that means hypothesis is also applicable in your science classes, which also the first one where this word is being introduced. So obviously there are two types of hypothesis. The first one is what we call the null hypothesis. This is when we say null hypothesis, these are the hypotheses that already formulated based on the process data. And when we say alternative, this is where we come in testing the null hypothesis whether it is true or false. When it is true, then it will going to remain as that statement. When it is false or proven to be false, then we create or we will going to use your alternative hypothesis as our new hypothesis. So when we say null hypothesis, so the null hypothesis is the one being tested and states the exact value about parameter. Okay, so when we say exact value of the parameter, it is already the value that already been computed. So when null hypothesis will be accepted, the null will be disregarded. I mean, uh, the the alternative when the null hypothesis will be rejected, this will lead to acceptance of the alternative. So in the first situation, when the null hypothesis will be accepted, it will be regarded. Okay, we will need to correct this one. Okay, so there are two types of hypothesis. The first one is null hypothesis. So it is given by the symbol H sub O. Okay, so that when you see this symbol, that means it is the null hypothesis. So it is a statement that is no difference between a parameter and a specific value. What do we mean by that? So we have the computed value, and if we were going to test that again, we will going to have a specific value, and that means it is the original value and the new computed value. If there is no difference between the two, that means that your null hypothesis is true. Okay, and we don't need the alternative. We only use the alternative hypothesis when the null hypothesis is proven to be false. Okay, so on the alternative hypothesis, you can either use HA or H sub 1. Okay, so again, we are using alternative hypothesis if the null hypothesis is proven to be false. So it only shows that there is a difference between a parameter and specified value. Okay, so there is a difference between the original value that is already stated, and when it is tested, there is a new value that is being produced. So we could say that there is a difference between two parameters. Take note that the original value is a parameter, and a new computed value is also considered to be parameter, or they are really parameters. Okay, so an opposing statement believed to be true when the null hypothesis is rejected. So whenever we have already proven that the null hypothesis is false, then we need to reject that one, and we need to have a new hypothesis which is taken from your alternative hypothesis. Okay, so aside from that, we have these two types of alternative hypothesis. This is not applicable for your null because again, the null hypothesis is already the original value. So what will going to happen? Okay, so there are two types of alternative hypothesis. The first one is what we call directional alternative hypothesis, and the second one is a non-directional alternative hypothesis. What is the difference between the two? Okay, so when we are doing alternative hypothesis, take note of the term less than, greater than, is not equal to, decrease, increase. Those are the words that indicates that there is an alternative hypothesis, and those are the statements which are what we call alternative hypothesis. Okay, so as you can see, we have the symbol. This one is for the less than, and this one is what we call is the greater than. So is the less than or is the greater than. Okay, so on the non-directional, the symbol that involves the quantifier is the not equal to. Okay, that is non-directional because certainly because of this word non-directional, there is no direction that it is pointing to, meaning you do not know if it is less than or if it is greater than. Example: formulate the appropriate null and alternative hypothesis for each research problem. So write in both sentence and symbol form. So the first one, and determine, of course, the type of alternative hypothesis formulated. So we need to have three. Okay, the average daily fuel consumption of ship owned by a certain shipping company is 37 tons. A marine engineer suggests that to modify ship's bulbous bow to lessen the fuel consumption of every ship. The company owner would like to know if there is a decrease in the fuel consumption per day. And take note, we formulate our alternative hypothesis based on what they wanted to know. This one. Decrease. Okay, from this statement, we will going to formulate our alternative hypothesis. Okay, and the null hypothesis is taken from the parameter which is your mean, and that is given by your 37 tons. Okay, so in the sentence we have for the null hypothesis, we will going to use the average daily fuel consumption of ships is 37 tons. And for your alternative, of course, again, we will going to get that to the new assumption or the thing that we need to or we want to know. Okay, that is your alternative. Okay, so the average daily consumption of ship is less than 37 tons. The question is, where does the word less than came from? Is less than, is less than. Okay, that is from the word decrease. Okay, the word decrease determines the word less than. Okay, so in symbol, of course, we have your population mean, which is given by the symbol mu is equal to 37. That if we will going to formulate that sentence or statement in symbol. So null hypothesis is your mean is equal to 37 or the average daily consumption. So we are dealing here with average, and take note that when we are having the word average, we are dealing with the mean more likely. Okay, so on your alternative, because of the word decrease and based on our statement, of course, we will going to use the symbol population mean is less than 37 because we wanted to know if there is really a decrease in the daily fuel consumption. So take note, we are using less than or greater than symbol, and that only means that it is directional. Okay, that's simple. Okay, for number 2. So here in number 2, the mean gas mileage of a certain ship is 18 nautical miles per gallon. One of the marine engineer do not agree with the data presented, so he conducted his own test. So in sentence, the mean gas mileage of a certain ship is 18 nautical miles per gallon. For your alternative, as you can see, the marine engineer does not agree. So it does not specify that the marine engineer thinks that it decreases or increases, greater than or less than. So that only means that we do not know which direction that the marine engineer is going to. So this only means that we will going to use the word not equal to since he disagree with the first statement. So we could say The mean gas mile age of a certain ship is not equal to 18 nautical miles per gallon. That's it. That's your only alternative. So in symbol, of course, okay, we will going to use this one. We will going to edit this one. This is actually not equal to. Okay, so we will going to rewrite this one, that is HE, or alternative hypothesis is mean, which is not equal to 5. Okay, so, and again, this is not directional, so we will going to use not equal to. Okay, okay, we will going to delete that one and edit that one. Okay, now, so we have attached a video here for another reference for you. If this one is not enough, you could view that one, and that is already in Filipino. Okay, so thank you everyone. That is our lesson for today for your null and your alternative hypothesis and lesson 1. Thank you and God bless.